All right, so my name is Scott Davidson, and I'm from McNeil's Seattle office. And I guess the lights are getting turned out on me already. No, I'm just kidding. It's funny. No, I'm good. Don't worry about it. So I'm here to really show kind of a new technology we have that might change the way you look at how to use your tools. And so we'll start there. One of the things I'd like to know though is out of everyone here, how many people use Grasshopper? That's pretty good. How many people use Python? How about C#? Okay, not as many. All right. So, and how many people use Revit? Almost as many people that use Revit. So, all right. So really, what we're going to talk about today is we're going to try to close the divide between Rhino and Revit, and it's been something people have been trying to deal with for years, and we have some new tech that hopefully should help that. It's all based on Rhino 7. So Rhino 7 WIP is a work in progress. You can download it today. If you can run Rhino 6, you can run Rhino 7 because it uses a Rhino 6 key. It'll get your Rhino 6 license from wherever you're getting your Rhino 6 license. It runs for 45 days, and then after that, it'll time out, but it updates every week. So if you just let it automatically update, it'll be good. It is a work in progress. All of this is a work in progress. So if you use it, please get back to us about how it worked, right? This is all, the only thing we know how to do is we allow you to download what we worked on yesterday, and we work on today what you complain about, right? That's about as far as it goes. And so if you're using this, that would be great. So about Rhino 7, there's a few technologies I should talk about. I should at least mention, but I'm not going to cover them tonight. The first one is in Rhino 7, we added sub D. For those of you that know sub D, our sub Ds are a little unusual in that they go to limit surface, and so you can go, you have your control net. They go to limit surface. You can edit in limit surface. Nice part about being at limit surface is it's very accurate, and there's a NURBS 1-to-1 to the sub Ds, so we can convert all the sub Ds to NURBS with accuracy. Okay. Alongside that, we've added a very powerful quad mesher. So you can take a quad mesher and you can take a scan or a mesh and you can convert it to quads. Quads, oddly enough, convert to sub Ds really well. Sub Ds can convert to NURBS. So now you have kind of a reverse engineering way of going. Another thing for architecture and engineering that's interesting is that quad meshers tend to find principal curvature really well on complex shape. So you can use it to map out a form and then use it to walk across the form and create structural components if you want. So that's the quad mesher. And the last technology that's kind of interesting is we've added a fast clash detector. So you can go through with Grasshopper, with Python, with Rhino Common, you can run our clash detector and find clashes between thousands and thousands of objects and have a report made, or go through and investigate it with Rhino Common, or whatever the situation may be. Now, because Rhino and Grasshopper happen to be running in Revit, that means you can use it to also do clash detection inside Revit. Right. So, but what we're going to talk about today is Rhino and Revit. So that's why I have Revit on the screen. I have to apologize, is I don't really get Revit, but I'll do my best. So what's important to understand is what this takes is you need Rhino 7 on your machine, you need Revit 2017 through 2020, and then you also need to download an open source installer that we have that will tie the two together. This is an open source project, by the way, so anybody that would like to can contribute. Or you can see the code and decide how we're doing it if you want to use it in your own projects. So what it'll do, what that little installer will do is it'll put this button here in Revit. And what's important to understand here is this is just Revit running, so we're not pulling a Rhino license yet. If I press on this button, what Revit's going to attempt to do is actually load Rhino and Grasshopper inside its own memory space. And so Rhino and Grasshopper are running inside Revit. And technically, while it's not going to look this way, technically this is one application. All these interface pieces that are going to show up here. What's interesting for those 3 Python people in the crowd, all right, is that we can access the Revit and the Rhino SDK in the same place, right? There's no difference. They're both running here. This is actually something we did in Rhino 7, is we pulled Rhino 7 apart into pieces, so Rhino 7 can be loaded inside any other Windows 64-bit application as a DLL. So this actually works in, it works in BricsCAD, works with ArchiCAD, works with Unity, works with Unreal, works with AutoCAD. But today we're looking at Revit. So anyway, we can look at both SDKs at the same time. You can see here that I have a Rhino sphere, I have a Rhino point, and then I'm calling into Revit information about the units here. And if I want to, this is actually the Rhino editor, but it works well as a Revit editor because we can also auto-complete Revit calls too within the same space. Okay. This is just trying to prove the point that this is one application now. Now, there haven't been a lot of CAD products that have been crazy enough to embed their product inside another one. But this is an attempt to do that. So now the reason we did this initially was because of that classic problem which we talked about a little earlier, which was how do I get my Rhino information into Revit? And it's always been a big divide. I always had to go through a file format. The file format stripped off a ton of information, and I didn't get to choose what that information was. And so now what you're going to see here is we can actually go data structure to data structure. And you can rewire how Grasshopper works, for instance, to wire the correct information back and forth between the 2 products. Okay, so I'm going to start, I hope, by, we're going to go over 5 different workflows here. The first one's going to be the classic one, how do I get my Rhino stuff into Revit? So we'll start over here. Oh, and so when I press that button, once Rhino's loaded, you can see I get a new toolbar in Revit called Rhinoceros, and I can click on here and I'll start Rhino that's running inside Revit. And I can go through here and let's just open a model. So this looks like Rhino because it actually is. And it just happens to be running in Revit. So, you know, can move around standard Rhino model every day. So I'm going to open up Grasshopper. And I'm going to start the kind of the simplest definition I possibly could. Let's go to... Now I used to do this on video, but nobody believed me. So what we have here is we have all the Revit. Oh, I guess I should talk about this. So when Grasshopper is running in Rhino, running in Revit, right? Get it yet?
Mm-hmm.
Conceptually, actually literally too, I guess. But Revit or Grasshopper creates Revit-aware toolbars that you don't see normally. So you know, we have a geometric element, a Revit edge, a Revit face, a Revit category, and element. So these are some inputs you can have. It also creates a Revit toolbar that does things like creates adaptive components, will create system families of objects, create walls, put family instances in. We can interrogate categories. We can create grids. And this thing that I heard is pretty important to Revit called levels. Seriously, you want to know what work in progress means? You walk into a firm, a very well-known firm, right? And you say, this is what we have. And they say, do you have levels? And we look at them and said, are levels important? And lo and behold, they are. So we put them in there. We have documents here, or we can interrogate the document. We can look at elements. We can create new families, load them, save them. We have different ways of filtering for objects in Revit. We can go through and we can have different input types like category picker and level picker, things like that. We can deal with materials, parameters, types, all that kind of stuff. So Grasshopper becomes Revit aware. And so if I took this here, this is all the categories here. We have this new filter picker in Grasshopper. It allows me to, for instance, type in some letters here, and you can see that I get the categories here that I'm looking for. In this case, I'm going to say furniture. Okay, and then I'm going to give it a name, and then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say set multiple VREPs like we're all used to in Grasshopper. Select some Rhino objects, and what I get over here is building looking furniture. All right. Now the only reason I use furniture is because we all know masses don't show up by default in Revit, so that takes a little bit more work there. But now the nice part is Grasshopper is driving, so if I change the object in Rhino, it changes updates in Revit now too. Categorized correctly as a direct shape in this case. Okay. Any questions?
What kind of feedback are you getting from all of this?
I can't worry about what other No, truthfully, this is technology that, first of all, we didn't know would work, right? But it did. And the best, if we can help solve your problems, the best I can do is just journey along and try to help you guys out.
What kind of limitations could they want to impose on you that might limit your development?
We're using the standard everyday public SDK in Revit. So if they'd like to limit their SDK, I guess they could do that. But it would limit everybody else too that's trying to plug into Revit. So, as of right now, it's been really good. There's been a lot. We've been able to do a lot of things, and we only have a just very small portion of it wrapped up. But it's already, people have already been finding it to be pretty useful. And so if you have any projects in your firm that this might be helpful, you can download it tomorrow and you can get some work done. Okay. So let me close this here. We're going to get a little more detailed. For those of you that know Revit, as you might know, nobody likes direct shapes in Revit. Everybody complains about them. Can't slice them, dice them, can't schedule them very well, all that kind of stuff. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to maybe take a look at a more granular way of being able to convert the information out of Rhino into Revit. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to open this layer dialog box in Rhino. And I'll open this up here. Okay, and open a little more interesting definition. Okay, so here what I have is I have standard curve picker in Rhino. So I'm just going to say set multiple curves, and I'm going to scroll in here and we're going to pick these curves. Now, one of the things you'll see here is I've named these curves. These curves just have standard Revit names or Rhino names on them, which will be quickly, hopefully, standard Revit names. So I'm going to press enter here. And what this is going to do is it's going to take these curves, okay, and then it's going to find the endpoint, find its height, and it's going to take the name off the curve, and it's going to create a level in Revit called that curve's name. Okay, and it's going to take those same curves and using a category filter into a family picker. So here's all your types, family types in the Revit. In this case, I'm using the very fancy generic 12-inch concrete floor. And I'm going to create a system floor by boundary based on that type hosted on that level I just made. All right? And so if you're over here, you're going to see in Revit, I have my levels named properly with my system floors hosted on that level. Now, nobody will be, if somebody downstream gets this and just Revit, nobody will know that it was created in Rhino. It looks like a regular, everyday system floor, as if you created it in Revit in the first place. Hosted in the right place, by the way. And as I found out today, if I unpin this, I can go and edit the boundary in Revit too. Now I don't want to edit the boundary right now because Rhino's also driving at the same time. So it gets a little confused if I were to do that at the same time. But, any questions about that?
A general question. This means that you have, it like kind of requires you to understand both Revit and Grasshopper, right? You've got to understand how to use those little graphic tools. We wouldn't call it scripting, but you have to understand that interface to really get this to work. So you're kind of asking two people. I don't know very many people that are pros at both.
Right.
So is there a way maybe through layers or something that I'm not thinking about to make it more straightforward?
There are a series of plugins that are coming down the pike, for instance, like Conveyor from Nathan Miller. And what it does, it's based on this technology. And what he has is one that says, you know, you can create your mappings between, let's say, layer and different object types and names and sublayers and all that stuff. You set all that up. If you draw it properly in Rhino, it will all come into Revit using this technology, but mapped properly. Nice part about that is you could save it. You know, you could have it as your standard, and that would work.
Right.
That's one way to do it. Now, you know, where we're coming from is really trying to help Rhino and Grasshopper users get into Revit. And the thing that we're finding that's interesting about this interface is that you can now granularly make that change almost on a project phase basis. So it may start as a lot of direct shapes, and then now you're getting your floors across the system floors, but the facade is still a direct shape. And then you want your facade, so now you're running your facades across, and then sometimes you want to bring information from Revit. You know, you want your grids and your levels, and you want this coming back this way, and you like the core. Core worked out great in Revit, so now you're bringing your core across, and so you're actually kind of going both ways, and that may adjust based on where you are in these different projects. And so that's a different way of looking at it, which is this ability to kind of adjust it as you go along. Because, like I said earlier, we're not going through a file format. This is data structure to data structure. So you can adjust the flow of information back and forth. Yep. Another interesting part about this is that any plugin that runs in Grasshopper now runs in Revit. That's all of them. So all those things that you can do in Grasshopper, you can now do in Revit.
Have you seen people run form finding and kangaroo stuff?
Yep. Yeah. Now I would highly recommend maybe not stanching a Revit object at every step, right? Yes. But you're going to see here that Grasshopper previews in Revit just as fast as Grasshopper previews in Rhino. So yeah, you can do that and then bake it into Revit when you're ready.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, I think it's great that you're talking not only from Rhino to Revit, because when I'm in both, I tend to also explore a lot of Revit through Rhino, just to like test out like 3D clashing and just to make sure that I feel comfortable that in 3D everything is great. But talking a little bit more as you're going through the examples of how to kind of bake the geometry and control that, because sometimes when you want to replace it, like how do you replace quickly? Look, I have like 100 floors. I want to replace my 100 floors with another 100 new floors. Does it like recognize the element ID, or do I have to like delete all the older floors and replace them with new? Some of that might be great.
So currently, that's called element binding. And so currently Grasshopper, if you're in the same session, it'll remember the IDs. So if you go and replace stuff, it knows, right? just keeps your same ID. So you have stuff hosted on it will stay hosted. But if you save those floors in Revit and you save that information in Grasshopper, you now have it both on Rhino. You have it both places, right? And so when you bring them back up, currently it would duplicate those floors. Unless, in the short run, you would tag those objects and said, these are Grasshopper objects, and I want you to delete them. You can have Grasshopper do that, right? Just through a parameter,
Okay.
right? You put on your own parameter on the objects. We're currently trying to figure out how to do element binding in a way that makes sense. And that's where we could use a lot of your help, is to understand. All that we know is everybody that's tried element binding in the past hasn't worked. But that doesn't help anybody very much, other than, let's explore some ways to do that. Is how do you turn that off and on, and how do you figure out which object came from what definition? We have some ideas, but any input from people would be really helpful. So does that help a little bit?
Yeah.
Let's see what we got. We got still definitions floating around in here, so let's turn those off. I want to talk about one more definition. So I'm going to go over 5 different workflows here. This is just the first one, Rhino to Revit. We're going to go to Revit to Rhino, right? And but just one more thing in terms of families. Yeah.
So if you're going to hit families, are you also going to hit adaptive components as well?
I can talk about adaptive components.
Okay. Because I'm like currently running into I guess it's a niche issue in regards
It's not.
like,
I can tell you right now.
yeah, right, for sure. It's the same thing, kind of like getting adaptive components like formed within Rhino, essentially slipped into Revit, and then once both files are saved out, the element IDs for both are completely like they're kind of foregone, right?
Right.
You know?
Yeah. So let's talk adaptive components. So curtain walls, we should talk about curtain walls in general. Facades in general, right? So facades, we always play the same game in Revit. So we have the standard everyday curtain wall, right? Which you can drive through Grasshopper if you really want to, right? Number of divisions, all that kind of stuff. Now, a lot of times our facades are a little more complicated than that, so we want to go to adaptive components. All right, nice part about adaptive components is we can drive them through Grasshopper, right? So if we have an adaptive component, we throw the points in there and the type, and it'll create the adaptive components. Now, the cool part about this is because we have Grasshopper running, we could use paneling tools to find all the points. For instance, we don't have to make the perfect untrimmed surface in Revit to analyze them. We just get our points,
Right.
And we can have Grasshopper just place all the adaptive components. Now, another cool part is that Grasshopper is smart enough to figure out, well, this is a full 4-point, frame, so I'm going to put this one. And on the edges, I have other conditions, and so Grasshopper is smart enough it could put different panels, adaptive components at different parts of the edges on the fly.
Yeah.
So you can drive that through Grasshopper if you want. And that works really well. Now, if adaptive components get too slow, which can happen, right? Then all you do is you generate the facade in Rhino and you wrap it. Its families going across, right? So we have all 3 strategies based on the complexity and where you're going with it. All of them ending up in good family categorization in a way that they slice correctly, they schedule correctly, they, all that kind of stuff.
How do you save it out? Like, you know what I mean?
Save it in Revit.
Because it's one file in another file, which is now in this.
Oh, you would say
Right.
right now you gotta
Save
save in both, yeah.
Okay.
If you want them together. Now, I know I'm gonna answer a few workflow questions for you, like a few workflow questions that you currently have, and tomorrow hopefully you can solve some of them. But I can tell you I'm gonna create about 10 times more workflow questions, right? I mean, it gets out of control about where does stuff live and how are we gonna do this, and because of the options that are available to us. All right, and you might find that you're storing a lot more of the model in Revit and you're just grabbing the information out, processing with Grasshopper and throwing it back in. That might be a valid way of doing this. We don't know.
So, sorry, to add on that, I think that like the kind of expounding workflow questions like are good. right? Because it means that no matter what, like we're still integrating the kind of design workflow of Rhino that we're all kind of, or at least a lot of us are like very used to, and like it expands what we can do and what we're capable of doing within documentation in Revit. Right. So I don't necessarily think that like just because we're asking like, well, how do we do this? Because I'm running into the issue right now, like how like specifically with adaptive components, like how do we necessarily like design a workflow that works for all of us? But that problem in and of itself has solved so many other problems in the past.
Yeah.
Wherein like I'm no longer locked to the limitations of Revit. Like I can design whatever it is that I want to design, however it is that we envision to design it, and I know that we can document it in Revit just because this technology exists.
And so, in pointing to documentation here, I just want to show this one, and then we'll get to the Revit to Rhino workflow too. So this is a B-rep here, just the standard. You know, I've got a footing, and I have a column, and I have a little shelf that sits off on this column, and that's a Rhino object. And then I have this curve in Rhino and a series of points. And if I open this definition, what this does is it takes this B-rep, and then it takes the first point out of the list. And then what it's going to do is it's going to move that B-rep to 0, 0, because in order to create a new family in Revit, I have to be at 0, 0. So then I go to my new family creator here. I get my column template, standard everyday Revit column template. I tell Revit and Rhino that I want this toggle to be true, which means I can override the family with Grasshopper. It keeps that family dynamic based on Grasshopper. I give it a name, I give it a category, and I have a new family. That looks an awful lot like a column. Okay. Then I can't insert families, I gotta insert types, so I gotta convert that to a type. And then based on all those points along that curve, I create a plane based on the tangent of that curve. And so now what I can do is I can insert my family, my component family, based on this plane, so it's oriented correctly based on the curve, and host it on level 2 in this case. All right? What's nice about this is that this is the family inserted over and over again, right? Standard everyday Revit component family. If I click on it, because it's a freeform, by the way, and this is the key, because it's a freeform wrapped inside a family, unlike a direct shape, it will hatch, and I have control on the way it hatches, and the way it sections, and the way it schedules in Revit. Right? Direct shapes, we can't do that. But we can do that with wrapped objects and families. The other nice part about this is because it's a standard everyday Revit freeform family, if I go in here and I edit it, I can actually edit it in Revit if Grasshopper wasn't around. Now you may not want to do that, but you can do it. Definitely don't want to do it while Grasshopper's driving, so because it's just going to write over our change. All right? But what I have here, if you take the time to wrap all your objects in families, then somebody downstream will be able to make sure it cuts, hatches, sections properly. So it's worth the extra effort. This is not an in-place family, but it's an embedded project family. You can write it out as an external family too if you want to, with Grasshopper. So does that help a little bit? All right. So, all right, we're going to go the other way now. We're going to start talking about Revit into Rhino. All right, and I'm going to open this very specific model that Autodesk sent me for this demonstration. So they said it was really special and I shouldn't show it to anybody. Let's see here. We'll go into Rhino. Let's close this so we don't have multiple projects on top of each other. Let's do this. Okay. So we're going to look at a few different things here. By the way, how many structural engineers do we have in the room? Oh, only 2? All right. So we'll talk very shortly then about what structural engineers might be able to find with this. But let's do this over here. Okay, so this model this definition takes a little longer to open. But what we have here is we have our categories, right? So our category picker in Grasshopper, right? So here's all our categories. In this case, I'm going to take roofs. I'm going to take that category, I'm going to find all the elements on the roofs category. I'm going to take the roofs category, I'm going to find its name, I'm going to put it in this Python script, right? This Python script is going to make sure that the layer named that category exists, and once it exists, it's going to populate the layer with all the objects in that category. All right, so I'm going to press this button, and you'll see that we get, in this case, the roofs in the model. Okay. Now, if I want to, I can go through here, for instance, and do this for the walls, and maybe the doors.
I would assume you could also do it for Worksets, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, that's great.
And
So
so
are you doing that now? As
what?
opposed to worksets, how is that doing that?
It's,
By element, but she's saying by workset, what do you mean?
But, well, so you can grab objects out of Worksets.
Sure.
And yeah, with this too, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
So I mean, right, because you have access to everything. So now, the only reason, this could happen all at once, but the only reason we do it with buttons is because it's a lot more dramatic. It slows it down so you can actually see it. And so we'll go through here and get the curtain wall mullions, and then we'll get the curtain wall panels. And what we have here is a model in Rhino from the, and this is a BREP, by the way, this is a true solids, true Revit solids in Rhino, and it's layered properly based on, in this case, based on category. But there's no reason it couldn't be either subcategory, it couldn't be family name or type or all those kinds of things.
And I'm assuming you can extract the analytical line for those comments.
You're just softballs up in the air. All right, going back to structural engineers, right, and talking about analytical models. Let me open up something that might work here. Let's open a structural model. So here's our structural model, and we'll get up to Rhino. Let's say new. So let's open a little different structural. Okay, so this one's going to go reach into the model for the analytical model. And there's some interesting things that we can do with that. And so you can see it's processing it right now. Don't have as many buttons on this one. And so it's going through, for instance, it's getting all the analytical beams, for instance, in this case, right? It's finding all the analytical beams, it's creating geometry from those. And then if I want to, I can turn on all the points for those analytical beams. Okay? Standard endpoints for all the analytical beams in Revit. Now, I'm sure a structural engineer could explain to me why there's intermediate points here. It has something to do with joints and stuff, but it doesn't seem like I want to use those very often. So what I can do is use Grasshopper to clean those up and actually just get the endpoints and merge them into one. All right? So now we have the analytical beam information plus the endpoints that we want from those beams. Okay? I can go through and we can do things like get the analytical walls for those walls that I actually can get analytic information from. So we're getting the walls there, we can get the columns. We can get all the information about those objects too. The type and the material and whatever else we want to do with it. Okay.
So to regenerate this, like let's say you've got a project in progress and you've got your whatever design team on the outside doing their thing, and you have the core and shell team doing their thing in Revit, and you have this thing running. Do you just click the button again and it'll regenerate, repopulate the model so you're coordinated? Is it that simple?
This is dynamic. This is as the Revit model changes, this updates. Now what's interesting about this is you can adjust things too. Like for instance, for some reason, you can see that this model has a bunch of light framing and it has some X's here for stiffening. They didn't turn the analytical model on for some reason. And so what we can do is I can go through here and we can, let me try to enable these here and see if this works. And so what it's going to do when I enable those is it's going to go through and it's actually going to enable the analytical model on those objects. Okay, and let's try this. And then what happens is when I recalculate this thing, it'll go through, hopefully, and it'll give me the analytical model to those objects that the architect, I guess, didn't turn on the analytical model for. So there, now we have the stiffeners and everything else to that. Now, another thing that we get to do is, those of you use the Carumba, or you go off to SAP, or you go off to ETABS, you go something like that, you don't even have to bake it into Rhino. You already have those objects in Grasshopper. So in this case, we take those endpoints, we clean them up for the columns in this case, and this is using Carumba, but we run those lines in as beams elements. We get the endpoints off them, we apply a load, and now dynamically, we're going off into Carumba from a Revit model. And so as you change the Revit model, your Carumba model updates. And this is true, you could do this with SAP or ETABS or whatever you use, right? You could do it for a robot if you want, because in Grasshopper, everything that runs in Grasshopper today will run in Revit. We can get to all those products.
So when you're like, can this extract elements that are in like a model group? Like if you have a grouping of like a core or something, you can extract like the individual walls from the group and
Yeah. Just to kind of show what we have about this, I'm just going to go through here, and we got one of our fancy buttons here. And what this is going to do is it's going to bake, but what it's going to do, it's going to bake on type. And so if I come in here, and you don't have to bake, but it's just to show kind of what the information we do have. I'll click on here, and you can see here that now it's created an analytical beam layer. All right, and then when this gets done, you can see that what I have is the actual type of element.
Sure.
But you might use that for something else if you're going directly into.
So then if you were to have is there a button to access Revit's like model groups, and then with parse through that model group, like core level 41 has composed of stairs, walls, and whatever?
If you can get to it through Revit's SDK, you can get to it through Grasshopper.
Right, so that would be a custom Python component.
If we haven't wrapped groups directly, that's correct.
Yeah.
Now we have a lot of filters, and there's more coming. So if you can't figure out the combination from these filters, including a class filter here, so you can type in your own custom class. But yeah, you could do it with a Python.
Yeah.
All of that. And what we're finding is we have a very small portion of the SDK actually wrapped right now. So if you need something tomorrow and you know Python, you can just write a little Python script to do it.
Because we are running into that issue right now, where essentially there's a project where there's a lot of like model groups that are constantly being updated.
Yeah.
We're trying to slip them into Rhino and like have them be able to update in Rhino, and then slip them back into Revit as they're updated. Right, exactly. So what I found is that right now there's no current direct method, like component, battery method to do that.
Right, you gotta write your
It's a
own
Python script
Python
that I
one
have to
to
write.
do it.
Right.
Yeah, because we haven't got there yet.
Yeah.
Now, it would be really helpful that you continue to explain to us why groups are so important, why you love them so much.
They save work. They save time.
Yeah, good.
They
Yeah,
save time.
That's good.
Well, the question is, are they integrated with this workflow? I don't know.
That is.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I have to say, there's like people that you want to have somebody that is very Revit savvy and can get into Revit and like update like 50 cores over 50 floors in a tower,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Because not everybody's gonna know Grasshopper. Like
Right.
we are privileged that most of us here know how to just interrupt. But I did want to ask you, like, how are you just basically basing all your development on like people downloading free software sending you like, hey, you should fix this and that's it, or do you have people that are like in multiple offices around the United States that are like allocated to send you like, you know, because I can imagine like being in our office and having this software and sending you like daily, like, hey, we need this. Hey,
Do it.
No, I know, and
Do it. No, we have both. We have large offices going through a specific person so they can bring all the information together, or that they're responsible for the workflow anyway, so they really get to understand what's being worked on. But we have individuals that are, you know, pounding our doors down. Now, the good part is, just a couple weeks ago, did anybody use PyRevit in this room? Okay, so we just hired Hassan, who does PyRevit, and he understands the Revit SDK. So thank goodness that he's now interpreting what everybody's saying, because, you know, I see Revit, blah, 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 and then I gotta Google, like, all those words, but he understands it, so he's been really helpful that way. And he can write Python components for you really fast. So, but yeah, we're working hard on trying to understand.
because I have one of the things that I know is that a lot of people, there's a lot of people that want to help workflows in our office,
Yeah.
but because they're not inherently going through the architectural process of going through concept, SDDD, CD, they don't know the day-to-day demand that sometimes we may have unless you go through that actual process,
Sure.
right? And
Right.
I know myself, like, I go through that process a ton, but I'm not as savvy as some of my coworkers in, you know, Rhino, Grasshopper, Revit. So I can dabble a little bit and, like, you know, help myself, but I end up having to need some help sometimes to do that, and how to communicate with them, the people that are savvy with that knowledge. And
Don't worry about getting hold of us, though. Always try to get hold of us, right? Always inundate us with information. We learn just as much as you do every time you ask us a question. So, and while this is getting busy, I have to tell you, it's really busy for us. It's really good to hear all levels, just whatever you know or don't know. That's all really good information. And, you know, part of it is even just try how to explain it to people of different expertise. You know, that we learn a lot that way too. Okay. All right, so back to this conversation over here. Did you guys get, yeah, you guys will have to discuss it later, I guess. Now, I don't want you to think this is just a Revit to Rhino thing and a Rhino to Revit thing, right? There's a lot of other things that we can do. And this was a surprise to us, but it's been fun. So I'm going to go through here and I'm going to pick this, maybe, if I get close enough. Oh, that's right, I can pick tab or something, right? So I'm going to pick this door. Okay, and here's the key. So I have this mark here. I'm going to explain what it's going to do because it's going to do it so fast. All right, so I got this mark here, and I want to take all the marks off these doors and put it in comments. All right, so I'm going to take my Grasshopper player. All right, and I'm going to take that script there, and I'm going to run this. And you notice that Grasshopper ran, or maybe you didn't, but here you can see that the marks and the comments are now copied. So we read the mark parameter and put it on comments for all the doors in the project. All 10 in this case. All right? But we can have some fun with this. So if, and like I said before, you know how I said all Grasshopper plugins now run in Revit. That includes things like Human UI. So if we take a Human UI script, right, using our Grasshopper player, and I run that, of course, Grasshopper is not going to show up, but Human UI dialog boxes are going to show up. So now you can create your own custom dialog boxes in Revit using Human UI. And if I update this, in this case, I can update this information here, and I can hit the update button, and you'll see it changes all the title blocks of 1 in this project. But it'll go through and update all this.
So wait, this is like Dynamo player with the
No,
Dynamo player.
This
so
is
like
this
sign.
is this is
You don't
exactly like Grasshopper player. Right,
That's
Human
good.
UI. In Revit.
There's a lot of these,
All
like,
right.
there's a lot of these redundant processes everybody hates doing, and like I'm not a programmer, I'm not a coder, I don't use Grasshopper Rhino, but like, how much would it take somebody to like do that? Like
I don't know.
all these
Let's
things where
look. Let's
Or you-
look. I mean,
because you're just clicking scripts that somebody's written, right? But like, how easy is it for somebody like me who
now,
doesn't know, like I don't know what the hell those buttons are. I
now,
know
okay, hold on.
So
I get you.
it's like
I
magic.
get
It's
you.
like magic. You know?
It is
I
like
just-
magic.
I wish I could just kill 2 hours of time because it would take somebody like a million.
That's super
Yeah.
simple.
All right, hold on. I want to be clear. I wrote this script. All right, I don't know somebody else write it for
Well,
me.
you know, like the back end. I don't know the back. I know the pictures. Right?
Now,
Like,
yeah. So now here, just so you can just see. I
you
agree.
hear what I'm saying? Though,
I
right?
hear what you're saying.
I never want to know the code.
Yeah, I understand. So you're gonna have to find somebody to write this part for you.
Yeah.
But so here's the dialog box, right? Here's the displayer. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create 2 text boxes. I'm gonna call it drawn by and checked by. Okay, and I'm gonna watch their values, right? Just like we do in UI normal. Then I'm gonna find all the title blocks in the model, find all their element IDs
Across all families.
across all families. Okay, now I could be smarter and do it by certain families,
Sure.
but in all families, and I'm gonna pump the element ID, and I'm gonna use this key, drawn by and checked by, and I'm gonna change their values based on how the dialog box update values. So that's all there is to it. Now, the difference is I turn this toggle to true, so every time I open it, it runs.
As manual or
What?
it's I said that would be the manual or automatic for
You
that
could
model.
do manual or automatic.
Okay.
Right. So, but it's, and the getter and setter is super simple, right? Just get that parameter, gets set.
Well, that-
So, the
That would
simple
work
stuff.
for revisions too?
Yeah, of course.
Hmm.
Anything you get a hold of with the Revit SDK, you can now get a hold of with Grasshopper.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're surprised too. All right. So what I really love that's been happening as I've explained this to people and shown this, we haven't shown this to a lot of people, but we've been showing it more and more, is that I have Revit people and Rhino people in the same room, and they're actually talking about the same workflow for once. So it's because all the applications, we used to call application, the single application is OneNote in this case. Okay. By definition, this is one application, right? We're all in the same memory space. Now, I have to tell you, if Revit crashes, Rhino's crashing, and Grasshopper's crashing, right? If Grasshopper crashes, Revit's crashing, and Rhino's crashing. We thought that was the definition of family, but Revit already used that term. So we got to put some. But it's been surprisingly stable, so that's been really good. Any other questions so far? I have one last thing. Yes.
What are the options of interpreting geometry? Is it still putting geometry from Rhino to Revit? Is this the same as the AutoCAD export thing?
No,
Okay,
it's
so
totally different.
how do you handle, say, the curve in Rhino too?
Well, so the curves in, it depends. If you can add direct shape curves in Revit, right, if you want to, you can also add curves in families themselves. If you want to use them as base curves for something else, that works too.
Or is it gonna be arc to arc or
Splines, yeah.
spline? Or
There's
do we have
splines-ish. It depends. So, I mean, it depends what Revit, I mean, we can push splines. Oddly enough, Revit does have splines. We can push splines in there. Now, it doesn't help you if you're gonna, like, create a wall off the splines because Revit doesn't know how to use splines.
Yeah.
So then you'd have to convert it to arcs,
Yeah.
and then Revit could do that. Or you could just extrude it with Rhino and push that object as a wall shape in there, and then you can use it as a wall. So we talked about having sub Ds. We have sub D walls pushing with windows in them in Revit, but because Rhino's sitting there, right? So it gets very depends. It depends is what it comes down to. So you can use Revit's tools, or you can override everything by getting Rhino to do it and just popping it in the families. And there's a lot of gray area in between them.
I mean, our daily flows, there was gonna be rationalization anyway in Rhino first.
Right.
Because we need to dimension the radius and stuff like that.
Well, and if you have to rationalize, so for instance, there was somebody here that had a stair, right over here, that was a Rhino stair, right? All curvy. I know who it is. All right? And you could rationalize it by having a series of arcs and straight lines, but I can tell you that stair was not a series of arcs and straight lines. Or you can send a Rhino model and get it machined, right? And the curve is the curve and it's accurate and it has infinite number of changing radii. Now what's really cool about that is I could push that in as a family in Revit and document it to the nth degree. But we still know that the fabrication information is in Rhino. So that's still allowed, right? That's still part of this process. So it just depends on what you want to do. What I'm trying to do is trying to free you from having to go down one path or another. So, right? Rationalization sometimes is a little overrated. Because I can tell you when it's in Rhino, we know exactly where everything is and it's beyond fabrication tolerance. Now, finding a machine to fabricate it may be a different issue, but it is very accurate. So, the other thing that I've seen is don't rationalize too early. So we have people that are trying to rationalize in Rhino, and then they're pushing all these arcs into Revit, and really probably what should happen is you push your beautiful big surfaces into Revit, and then you rationalize in Revit. That's another workflow that's starting to take hold in this process. Because if you can you imagine having a big roof with like thousands of different arcs, and Revit's going to tell you, forget it, I don't want a big roof with 1,000 little arcs in it. And if you just put the big beautiful surface in there from Rhino through this process, and then you have adaptive components march along, then Revit takes it.
I've also found that Revit is not very good at very small dimension objects.
Yeah,
Like,
anything lower than a millimeter edge, it will not take. And so what's nice about that is that you can use Rhino to find those edges if you want to and fix those. Or you push it in as a mesh and use the Rhino model. If you really need that thing to be less than a millimeter to fabricate, you better be using the Rhino geometry to fabricate. Yeah. Right. As far as we can tell, Revit uses an old ASIS kernel. So it has, we're learning slowly but surely what it likes and doesn't like. Yes.
So for like the adaptive component workflow, are you creating the adaptive components in Revit, or are you making them in Rhino?
In Revit.
In Revit, okay. And then it just grabs it just finds the family type and then pushes it.
And then you send your points in the correct order.
Yeah.
And then off it goes. And you can set parameters. So if you have parameters in there by name in the adaptive component, you can set those with Grasshopper on the fly too.
Like mullion depth and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So I have found a kind of like weird limitation in regards to family redefinition within Rhino and then pushing out those like an adaptive component using those families. So I'm trying to figure out a way to close the loop between defining geometry within Rhino, then using that defining geometry within Rhino to push out to an adaptive component family in Revit, and then tying it back into Rhino as points so that the adaptive component family can adhere to.
Yeah.
So, is there a push to get that to all kind of seamlessly work? I can get to work with two different scripts, essentially, where like, say I have geometry that defines an adaptive component family that like, however it is that we want to define it in terms of like geometrically. Yeah. I need to have a separate script that does that parametrically, then save, close, push it out to Revit, open up another Grasshopper script that then defines the points for that adaptive component family to generate.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how Revit works.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like, is there any sort of intention within the pipeline to like get that to kind of close?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
I don't know if it's possible.
Okay.
The only thing I do know is that you can talk to multiple Revit projects and files at the same time through Grasshopper.
Yeah.
So you technically probably talk to both at the same time through one definition.
So kind of like that's what I've been doing, like open in background.
Yeah, open it right, modify, go back, and but you could have that in one Revit. Grasshopper doesn't have to close.
Right. So like that open in background is like a Python process for me right now.
Right, and you know, we'd have to have you talk to Hassan about what's
Okay,
possible and
alright.
not possible through the SDK. There's some timing issues there with adaptive components
Right,
that
yeah.
would be
And
interesting.
that's why I've had to separate into two separate Grasshopper scripts.
Yeah,
because-
what we might do is like to do a data dam, you know, in Grasshopper where it
Yeah.
does it, and then you say, okay, now I don't know, you'd have to look
Yeah,
at the timing
Yeah,
internally. But does, and I found especially with adaptive components, timing becomes important because it can take a while.
to pop it. Yeah.
Right, now once you populate the adaptive components in Revit, they will preview in Grasshopper, in Rhino. And therefore, if you wanted to, you could have a bake feature that baked that back into Rhino off the adaptive component geometry that's there.
Yeah.
So you could do that.
So is it possible to like, can you build like the reference line rig of like an adaptive component that you'd host geometry on in Rhino in this workflow, and then bring it into an adaptive family?
Not yet. So
Cool.
one of I know one of the things you can't do yet either is like, you know, when you get into create a family and you create extrusions and sweeps and stuff like that, you can't do that yet in Rhino inside Revit, but just because we haven't done it yet, it's possible.
Yeah.
And we'll be able to add dimensions with Grasshopper.
That'd be
Oh yeah, it would be really cool.
yeah.
Yeah, Kiki told me it's possible, so he's the one writing it, so you know, he's in Barcelona. So, and Hassan didn't say no either when I passed that by him, so we're cool.
What's his name?
Hassan?
No, the other guy.
Kike.
Okay.
Kike, yeah.
What's he doing out there?
In Barcelona?
Yeah.
He's from our Barcelona office.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. He's super talented too. Yeah, so he's a really nice guy. He's actually on a 2-week vacation for his 40th birthday. So, I know, isn't that nice? I wish it was, I think he's in Greece or somewhere. It sounded wonderful to me, but he'll be back at the end of the week. So, any other questions?
Yeah, I mean, like, a lot of what I encounter is like something really mundane, like drawing line work on a sheet. Is that something that can be, if it's defined in Rhino in 2-dimensional space, can it be populated onto a sheet right now with what's currently?
With the components that are currently there, no.
Okay.
Yeah, we just haven't got the sheets yet, and so Hassan can help with that. You know,
You can create model lines. So
you can create model lines in 3D,
You can-
so
you
yeah,
can do
that's
it
not a problem.
and just hide them in a website.
Yeah.
What's the
So, but a lot of this is kind of like, you know, we're just trying to add things as people ask for them because we're trying to figure out what's most important. And so, yeah, creating layout levels was.
So creating sheets is not something-
No, it's on the list. It's becoming more and more important.
So
Automate sheet creation.
how does this tie into the visual art?
So Visual Arc is getting an interface. Kiki, oddly enough, wrote Visual Arc. So Visual Arc's getting a Grasshopper interface, and then it'll tie directly to Race. So you could have Visual Arc family, Revit family, and Revit same top. So, but that'll take some time.
Do you see these programs merging just to be one program?
Well, technically they are.
That's what he's.
That's the weird part here.
But if you buy Revit, out of the box Revit, it doesn't already have Rhino.
Now you have to have our upgrade.
Are you able to see, like, so there's a lot of annoying things that I'm sure are code related that Revit sucks at. And it was like, hey, if I like knew, like if Buddy over here could write some code, he could probably tell me why like Revit, for example, freezes or crashes. Are there things that you've discovered just like in doing this, just working like this?
Well, like
In
the big facades, you know, like you could wait forever for Revit if it's gonna get done. Or you just have Rhino do it.
It does it
throw
much
in.
faster.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't. So what we saw today isn't a product of just the model being so simple. It's a product of just the fact that Grasshopper is much better and Rhino is much faster
For
at that.
geometry calculations, yes.
You would, the only thing that I would say is some big models, you have to hide the geometry in Grasshopper so you don't expose the whole building. facade.
Right, you don't want to
Because then it
instantiate all the
It
objects.
becomes really heavy.
You gotta be careful. You
You gotta
want
be careful,
Rhino to
yeah.
be doing the calculation
And not-
and pop it into Revit.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Because one thing that I've always encountered, and I've always been a Revit designer person, whatever, it's just so damn slow by the time it's impossible to work with. And now what I'm seeing here, it's like, okay, well, if I just do this in Revit, finding a little bit of Rhino, all of a sudden you can work much faster and you spend less time.
Yes, in certain cases. And so, like, we can't make adaptive components faster. They're just what they are. We might be able to place them a lot faster. And so, I guess what I want to say, a more accurate way of saying this is relative to Revit, it's faster to have Rhino around.
Right.
Okay? Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't workflows that are going to take half an hour. Right? You know, if you had an adaptive component and Grasshopper's placing 10,000 adaptive components that are complicated, it could take half an hour, right? It's not Grasshopper's issue, it's just the adaptive components are being calculated by Revit, that's how long we wait.
Sure.
Right, but we can bypass this, and here's the key, we can bypass adaptive components if we really want to. If time's the problem, we have more tools now to bypass that, right? Because we could just do it in Rhino, pop them across.
Right.
And just go with that. So we just didn't have that option before. And so I don't want to, it can slow down, but you know, we're all in this together on this one. One last one. So again, I don't want this to think that this is Rhino to Revit, Revit to Rhino. So we're going to open a definition here. We have, let's do this. So we have Grasshopper, maybe. We have Grasshopper. We have a definition, there we go. All right, so we have Grasshopper running in Revit, which is what we originally talked about at the start of tonight. Okay, what's interesting here is I have, instead of having Rhino objects here, I have Revit objects. So I'm going to say set one Revit edge. I'll pick that. Kind of come here, set one Revit edge. Pick that.
Oh no!
Yeah! Whoever noticed that right off the bat. Impressive, yeah. So we have a lofted surface from Grasshopper previewing in Revit based on all edges. Right? Grasshopper, as usual, is dynamic, right? So I edit the wall and the lofted surface updates. Okay, so this is Grasshopper drawing Grasshopper geometry in Revit. Now, if I want to get real fancy, or not even that fancy, I'd get more fancy now that I understand what's going on. I go here, and I can say I want a direct shape. In here, let's enable, and so now I have a direct shape over here. Here's a roof, and if I do this, it's actually going to stand shape that roof again, based on the wall. If I wanted to get real fancy and I wanted Karumba to like giving me the stress or kangaroo and all that stuff, you could have all that running and creating this form. So, yeah. So everybody that raised their hand and knows Grasshopper, you now know Grasshopper for 2 applications at least, right? And you're now that much more useful to your company.
Yeah, so I asked someone who knows both Rhino, Grasshopper, Revit, Dynamo. Obviously, they prefer Grasshopper because it's more robust, flexible. They're more used to it. So does this mean that I don't have to learn Dynamo anymore?
Yeah, what's the point of that anymore?
Yeah.
It was just even worse than Grasshopper for that. I don't even know what's that.
I don't know much about Dynamo.
But
I can say though that if you know Grasshopper and you learn a little bit of Revit, you got a pretty powerful tool. So we'll continue to try to get better, to understand Revit so that we can write better tools, and so you can beat us into submission, right? So we get the right tools out there.
So, I mean, I know that this is probably something you may or may not be able to answer, but when do you think that a tool like this will be able to officially come out on the market? Do you see it like a year, 6 months, more?
Yeah. Well, I have to be really careful when I answer this question. So this is based on Rhino 7. And Rhino 7, we have more than enough features, we think, to let it out. We're just trying to kind of focus fix bugs and kind of clean it up and like things like that. So we're in a much shorter time frame than longer. So don't fall asleep on this one,
Okay.
right? We're not going to spend another 3 years going through this. Okay, and we're getting so much pressure about people saying, I want this like tomorrow.
I know 5 to 6 took a long time to
Yeah,
take out.
This
so,
will be much shorter than
okay.
much shorter.
Can you talk about some of the other Rhino inside use cases? Like you mentioned Unreal, you mentioned a couple of them.
Yeah, they're a
Can you
little.
touch on that a little?
Well, so Rhino Inside's technology, you can look online and it's all open source. And like in Unity and Unreal, what we're doing is substantiating Revit objects, Rhino objects in Unreal real time. So, all our surfaces and meshes and all those kinds of things. Now, where it goes from there is not clear because we're still trying to figure out why people are using Unreal and Unity.
Is it like visualization?
Yeah, well,
like real time.
Real-time visualization, and it's a 3D interface on a browser.
Yeah.
And so we see that. Now Unreal and Unity, I think, are going to take over the projects themselves.
Okay.
So they're going to do the integration. There's also another project we have is called Compute, and it's Rhino inside behind a REST API. And so now you can use JavaScript and Python to get to Rhino common calls across the web and throw it in your browser, for instance. And those are all Rhino inside technologies. But type Rhino inside Revit and you can see all that code and play with it.
So that's also another interesting thing that I'm like kind of interested in regards to like where you're going towards. So I know
That would assume we had vision.
Yeah, right. Well,
Right.
No, I guess come on. Like, so obviously you guys know about like Forge API and like
Sure.
all that stuff, right? And like 3JS and things like that, right? So like I'm trying to integrate Rhino Compute into just like a bog standard shitty 3JS viewer.
Right?
And like there's no real documentation out there
No.
for me to like kind of
No, but there's a sample
Okay.
that goes into 3JS.
Right. And so there's also like the kind of layer of like Power BI on top of that.
Right, which Nathan just did.
Which I just saw.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
got me interested in
Yeah.
doing something because I just literally just got off a call with Nate.
Yeah.
Like, his,
See,
like,
you're
how
just
he did.
you are like right behind us.
I'm just trying to hit.
That's right. That's right. So our what we're trying to do is just help people explore these ideas.
Okay.
And so it's all open source, and as much source as we like. If you asked us to do something and we didn't have a sample for it, we just write it and throw it back out.
Okay. All right. Fine.
Yeah, that's
great.
and
So,
that's
like,
what
if you
like
can start I'm
Yes.
reading through your compute documentation just to try to like easily translate like
do you feel like doing this sometimes?
a little bit.
Yeah, I know.
Just a tiny bit.
Yeah. You know Luis?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So hit him up.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, because
Okay.
he'll rate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Don't tell him I said that.
I'll try not to.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, but Luis is great. He's the one that wrote the 3JS.
Yeah.
He's
Right.
running the JavaScript one.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Cool.
he can help you out.
Alright.
So, no more questions. All right.
Rhino 7 comes out whenever Rev 21 comes out. Any issues?
Oh.
You don't know.
I mean, we're still working on 2020.2, right? That just came out. So as long as everybody stays nice with each other, then yes, it should.
Because Dynamo sucks for that.
Yeah, I've heard. Yeah. But we can only react to what we have. Now, it's nice that we're using the public SDK. We're not doing anything tricky, and so as long as they keep their SDK functional, we should.
Let's be honest.
It's ugly.
Yes.
Let's say it appears that some firms have internal specialists
Yes.
who can handle workflow like this. If we have to outsource it to people like maybe one-to-one or design to production who are known for doing some computational work, or let's say piano or Excel, do you have any services for firms who might be working on a project with large enough scale and magnitude to provide certain types of services, maybe building some customizing to some tools that are specific to the project, or would you rather focus on just developing the tool and let that type of work handled by people like Nathan Miller or
Yes. We'd rather have the experts and the people with knowledge do that. So Nathan, so a few others. Nathan's a great place to start. He can handle all that stuff. But there's a few others, and we can recommend others if knowing how much they know. This technology is very new. Nathan's been on it from the very beginning, so he's good. But yeah, we would normally try to help you find somebody that can actually solve that for you. It's not really our expertise. So, our expertise, by the way, if you just want to know where our expertise is accurate freeform geometry and decent APIs. Right? Beyond that, we can just help you guys do better work. Okay? So we're in the marine industry, we're in the jewelry industry, we're in car industry, right? Medical industry now, all those kinds of things.
One last question. Developing using IDE or Visual Studio, for example. How about where is this currently in terms of like cross-platform, so Mac, PC compatibility? How safe is it to develop Mac application?
So our Rhino 6 code base is almost the same. Our Rhino 7s are coming out the same day. So Rhino 7 for Mac and Rhino 7 for Windows is now releasing on the same day. So if you were to write something in Rhino for Windows using Eto and C#, it would run on the Mac too. Now Rhino.inside technology only runs on Windows because Mac is a little bit more, they're a little bit more jumpy about one application embedding itself inside another. But in terms of like in your case, if you wrote Grasshopper, if you wrote it correctly, it runs in both places at the same time, same code base. So you can get a hold of our guys how to make sure you do it the right way. But our guy, everything in Rhino 7 is both same day, and in fact the same code. Yes.
Are you worried about someone embedding their application in Rhino?
No, we would have. That ship sailed a long time ago. Yeah. No, we do. No. So, yeah. But, yeah, that was a long time ago. Okay. Anything else? We're good? All right. Thank you very much.
What's the next question?